Welcome to EZConvos. This is number 6. Free speech. Should there be limits or no holds barred? So, free speech. The right to express information, ideas and opinions, free of government restrictions based on content and subject only to reasonable limitations, as the power of the government to avoid a clear and present danger. Now, in certain countries like the US, they do have the protection of the First Amendment, right, under the US Constitution, and other countries have certain aspects that do protect and preserve some speech. So I guess the first question I will start off with is, should free speech be absolute? So should the right to free speech, be absolute? Let's start with
definitely.
Okay.
Because if you don't have free speech, what you have, you can't really express your freedom of thought. and it can even restrict you to like how much you can say anywhere. Like you say something that someone doesn't agree with, they can either like jail your ass for life or just take away whatever rights you may have. It's the biggest right you need.
That's a good point. Jay, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, it has to be unfiltered, doesn't it? To an extent, though, I think people should be free to say what they want, express themselves. Otherwise, we don't learn. Even if it's something that goes against your own philosophy, even if it's something derogatory towards you, they need to be allowed to do that. Not because making people feel bad is a good thing, but that's the only way people learn. Is if someone disagrees with you or has an opinion on you, you can discuss how they came about that opinion, and if anything, you can persuade them that their view is wrong. You can show them the light, so as it were. I think the only kind of restriction, and this isn't really with free speech, but it's more a case with when it gets to a stage where it's inciting things, where people take action based on what they've heard, based on someone expressing their free speech. So, for example, if someone says, "Kill these people," I'm going to kill you. We should kill this person. I think that's when free speech becomes more of an act of inciting violence. So there needs to be that kind of distinction drawn. But apart from that, people need to feel free to express themselves.
So you would take the view that you can basically say what you want as long as you don't do it to incite violence, i.e. physically harming people or getting a mob to like
I
into a
can agree
fury.
with that myself. I mean, as long as you don't bring harm to anybody else, like nobody, then you should be able to do what you want to do. Especially when it comes to just like speaking.
Okay.
Speak your thoughts, speak your voice.
What do you think of that, Insurrection? What's your view regarding that?
Absolutely. I think it's very important that we're able to express thoughts. I think, as you said just before we started the stream, sunlight is the best disinfectant for certain ideas. Right now, you can see a very kind of big debate between the left and the right playing out before our eyes, where people expressing a certain point of view are really blocked. And if anything, that's driving their speech further underground. So I think it's quite dangerous to block free speech.
And Bethnian, do you believe that free speech should be absolute, i.e. you can say what you want, even if your opinions may offend other people? Or do you think there should be some sort of limitation on speech?
It's a hard one, because I feel like at the very least you have to be able to like think freely and speak freely. Otherwise, if everything's like censored and whatnot, you've just taken away like so many people's like freedom of choice, and then people feel like they have to be silent. It's a difficult one though, because I sometimes think, should there be a limit when it starts causing people like harm? And some of these people who are speakers and they oppose the majority opinion, they often like rally up a lot of negativity, and they have like a real negative stereotypical image associated with them, and then a lot of their followers are extremists, or they go out and they cause harm and whatnot, and I feel like you also have a right to be protected as well. So it's I feel like there needs to be a limit, but it's really difficult because it's not like solid. So where do you draw the line?
So a bit of a double-edged sword to an extent.
Yeah,
where
definitely.
Okay,
but
so
we have a right as human beings to protect other people and have a right to like security and safety, and if other people's opinions and thoughts are putting you in danger, then that's completely wrong as well.
I think the reason that
it's like irresponsible.
Sorry to butt in.
Yeah, go for it.
I think the reason we have this kind of paradigm shift right now is because of the internet and the way that people can communicate and how it's uncontrolled. In the before times, before the internet was around.
I remember those days. Yes.
in the before times, if somebody was really saying something quacky or what was the word, inciting hate speech or something like that, they'd be dealt with appropriately. But now there's like almost 8 billion people in the world. If someone kind of starts speaking out against something and does create some kind of community of like fascists or something, and says we're going to tear down some building or something, they could get support, and then they could cause damage and do something dangerous. Whereas 100 years ago, before the internet, that couldn't be done in the same way. So I think it's kind of, we've got this amazing, with great power comes great responsibility. We've got this amazing platform. How do we deal with that? How do we use that as a society?
So to a degree, you see it more as a parcel of like the growing technology, and as that starts to expand, we need to kind of differentiate where, how and when, what is and what is not permissible, because there's just so much speech that we kind of need to have some sort of limits to a degree, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, think about how the Facebook platform, when you had Mark Zuckerberg testifying to court, how they're able to moderate certain kinds of speech. What the issue there really was they were describing themselves as a platform, and the people that were kind of testifying against them were saying, well, you're not acting like a platform, you're acting like a publisher. You are selectively putting certain information in front of people's eyes. There was a whole Russia collusion scandal, blah, 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 all of that kind of stuff. And like now about vaccines, there's a lot of stuff. So they are controlling what kind of things they put, like fact checkers on everything. Then you're not being a platform in that moment. You're no longer a platform. You've become a publisher, and you're selecting what you're publishing. So at that point, you've kind of taken away the freedom of speech that you're meant to. You said that you had from the beginning. Now it's kind of changed, right?
Well, I mean, that's how it's always been with things like Facebook. I mean, you could give someone a book and tell them it's like keys to a fucking Lamborghini or something. If they don't know what keys look like, they're going to be like, oh, this is legit. You just assume what this individual's telling you is right, and you just go with it. You don't really second guess it.
So where then, if any, would you say, where would the benefits or some sort of benefits of restricting free speech come from? Like, would you guys say that there pretty much aren't any benefits? For example, if you were to play devil's advocate, a lot of the people may say there should be some sort of speech in place for the offence of certain people or certain groups.
Honestly, like 100%. Like if someone's talking mad shit, like they're about to do something, then because they're talking about it, someone else can do something to stop it. It's cause and effect. You know about it, so therefore you can stop it. But if they were to remain silent about it, you would remain unaware of it, just like everybody else. So no one would know what's going down besides that one individual who's about to do something.
What about you, Jay? Would you say that there may be some sort of benefit in restricting certain elements of speech, or?
I mean, in terms of in an ideal society where people would be nice to one another, that would be one benefit I can think of. It's even if you have an opinion on someone, it's always good to talk about disagreements you have, political or otherwise. It's even nice when you arrive at a kind of consensus viewpoint. But if you have an opinion on someone based on how they look or what their worship or that kind of thing, and it could be something that is going to cause them upset, even if you're like, well, if it facts over feelings, which I kind of agree with, but we only live once, and from a place of do unto others as you'd have them do to you, kind of let people get on with their life without causing unnecessary harm. And you could make that kind of argument, I suppose. It's try and be nice to people. Like if you can avoid causing someone harm, maybe it's best, because especially if you subscribe to karma, then you might come back to bite you in the arse at a later date.
Okay.
I don't really necessarily say just like be nice to everybody. Yeah, kindness is legit. Like spread that shit. But really, all we need to do is not try to please other people. That's where most of our problems come from. We're trying to do something to please someone else who isn't us. If you just really do what you want. You have that boring desire to do it. You do it. Fuck everybody else. Then everyone else would be good. Like, we wouldn't be getting into conflict. In some cases. I'm gonna throw that last piece out.
What do you think, Bethany?
Yeah, I was just thinking of the whole be kind sort of movement, because you have so many people who are like in the spotlight, and then, you know, so many like trolls and whatnot. I think there should be like limits, or it should be censored when you're trying to protect like a vulnerable group who can't protect themselves. What Marshall was saying about you shouldn't be pleasing people, that ties in with what we were saying about the whole go vegan and whatnot. Stop trying to please everybody else and look like you're agreeing. You know, do you, but respect other people are going to do them, and that's that. And like, just live, like, be civil.
Okay, so it's more like a live and let live, know the common ground, and just know basically some sort of inherent limit of what is and what is not completely unnecessary.
Yeah, definitely.
The kind of subject of being kind really reminds me of the whole like Milo Yiannopoulos, Ben Shapiro, social justice warrior kind of debate that was around like 2-3 years ago, and there was like a really big conversation around that, and people were like, that was really causing a lot of debate about freedom of speech, because you had people that like Ben Shapiro or Milo Yiannopoulos were branded as quite hateful in what they said, but their following would say that they're not saying anything. They're not inciting hate. They're not inciting violence. So should they be allowed to say what they want? Or, well, because we disagree with their opinion and because they're mean, they hurt my feelings, so get them off the campuses. That's what happened a lot. They were meant to speak at universities, and universities at the end of the day are the places where people are meant to be able to discuss these ideas. You're supposed to have your ideas challenged. That's the reason you go to university. It's meant to be a difficult experience. You're supposed to be exposed to this stuff. And now we've got this situation where universities are a place where people are coddled and protected, and oh, don't worry, you're safe. I watched a clip where that was exactly what these students were saying. They were yelling at a professor, we're meant to come here to have a home. It's like, no, you're not. You're at university. You're meant to be challenged and set up for the real world, because the real world is a harsh place. You can't just expect to be coddled. So that kind of flies in the face of what Bethany Ann was saying, how it's kind of like a be kind sort of situation. Like, do you want to be kind or do you want to be challenged? I think.
That's a great point, because that actually moves on to my next point, which is, as you said, like the coddling of the youth. Are we actually doing a disservice to society, especially the younger generations, by restricting certain speech?
I mean, people are so soft now. Like, compare them to how people were like even 50 years ago. Mentally, they don't have the strength to get past like shit that they find offensive, even on a small level. It's doing us a great dishonor as like a species.
Yeah, I agree.
And when you say that, is that because
everyone's calling it like the snowflake generation, isn't it? Because everyone's saying everyone's putting feelings before. I'm thinking, is that a really bad thing? Because I used to watch like Milo Yiannopoulos and whatnot, and like I agree, they always get like a lot of backlash. I think if you're not making personal attacks on like an individual, fine, but like I said, if you're targeting like a specific group who are vulnerable, that's different. But then the whole facts and feelings, is it that bad that we put feelings before facts? And it's making, we're not robots and whatnot.
I mean, yeah, we might not be robots. I agree with that completely. But still, you always have to put thought before action. You can't just do something without thinking it through to the T.
I think what you said is really a good point. It depends what action you want to follow from your thought. Like, if we never did anything, like even with the whole women's rights and the suffragettes and whatnot, and they spoke up, we wouldn't be where we are. And Marshall, if it's okay to say, you're a Black American, aren't you? So if you think of it,
Proud of
if
it.
our voices were never heard, we wouldn't have got to the place we are. It depends on what action you want to follow from the thought. I think that's what it is.
Okay, fair enough. Because it's a lot of it kind of links in also with some sort of Nietzschean thought where in order to grow, in order to improve yourself, you need to go through some sort of suffering. And I was just wondering, in respect to us, if that would be, I think as Philip said, like exposing yourself to contrary opinions as well, putting yourself in uncomfortable situations so you not only improve
Well, that's the
yourself
only way
and
how
your
you really
knowledge.
grow is by putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. You're not gonna become a new person, or any aspect of you is not gonna change if you just stay complacent.
Yeah, and like, would you guys regard censorship of speech as like a form of infantilization, treating people as a whole somewhat as children to the point that they don't know what's good enough for them, they shouldn't be able to hear XYZ, therefore we as authorities or your hires will decide for you? What's your view on that?
No, I really think that everyone should just be exposed to everything there is out there. That way, they kind of have some understanding on what they want instead of someone else controlling what they see. Because if you're controlling what they hear or see and just experience, then you're controlling them. They don't have freedom. You take that away from them. And if you take that away from them, then what do they really have?
That's a good point. Jay, what do you think of that?
Can you rephrase it?
No.
Question, sorry. What was the question?
Is censorship of speech a form of infantilization? So basically, yeah.
You could argue that it is, and you could argue that it's in the interests of the people that it purports to be, looking out for. So in one sense, it is because it's essentially saying you're not allowed to say this, you're not allowed to do that. Be mindful when you say this. It's kind of like if you want to go out and play football, but then your mum's like, oh, make sure you don't bring your muddy boots back into the house. Make sure you're back in by 10, whatever, So it's kind of giving you rules when in reality you want to get out there and let loose, right? But on the other hand, you could argue that it's in their interests. So, for example, if someone were to say something or say something derogatory, and you know for a fact that that could incur violence or something, that they could get hurt in the process, you telling them, oh, you might want to, be careful around this place or keep your opinions to yourself. It isn't usually, that isn't a, trying to infantilize someone. It's more a case of looking out for their interests, even if it's kind of like it shouldn't be that way, but that's often the way it is. So yeah, it's a bit of both depending on the context.
And just quickly off topic, Philip, I'm not sure if your friend Akesh34 is trying to join the channel or not, because I know that he managed to join Discord, but I don't know whether he's trying to actually join the channel.
I think he wants to, but I think he's just having technical difficulties. Matt, you need to use Discord, not Twitch. So.
Okay, no worries. And yeah, Insurrection, do you have any thoughts on that? Censorship as a form of infantilization?
I mean, yeah, it definitely feels like it's infantilizing you if you've got the ability to have a conversation. Like personally, I always endorse this idea of being exposed to both sides, listening to what someone has to say, and then judging it based on my my own intelligence, essentially, if that idea is logical. And sometimes I listen to these ideas that people are trying to discuss, like very like left-leaning or social justice, or even far right or far left. It seems to be both extremes, which don't have like sound logic, sound reason based in their perceptions or what they say. It's somewhere kind of in the middle where people are willing to be exposed to ideas, but also being gentle to each other, being kind to each other. Just like this conversation, we're not going to bite each other's heads off for saying something that might be deemed inappropriate or something like that. We can actually have a conversation about an idea, which is what I think a lot of the people on the left are kind of lacking. They're lacking this ability to have an open conversation. which is why we need free speech.
I know. Typically, perhaps in our circles, or in wherever we tend to, go to, it might appear that it's just the left, but I think it's universal. So while the left may be the ones that seem more prominent, the ones for university, for example, that's a big one. I think you'd find an equal amount of people representing the right who perhaps are the same. So, for example, if you want to go to the other extreme, you'd find diehard Catholics or Christians or born-again Christians who are absolutely opposed to any sort of discussion about contraception, women's rights, women priests, all that kind of stuff. It's a different form of, in my opinion, censorship, but it still exists. So I think it's universal, and we need to make that distinction.
Okay, that's a good point. So it is on both sides where you will get extremities at times.
100%. It might seem a bit more left-leaning at the moment because of it's more out there, but I think if you dig beneath the surface, especially in more kind of conservative environments or places, and I say this as someone who typically leans that way, you'd probably find equal amounts of censorship in some form. So yeah.
Okay. So then that will move me on to the next segment. And Philip, you touched upon this at the start of the stream when you mentioned that sunlight is the best disinfectant, especially in regards to exposing controversial or absurd views and opinions, things that may not have any sort of factual basis to them or just be completely abhorrent. But if we start restricting speech, won't that to some degree start fostering that sort of speech to become unchallenged, where it can foster and grow unchallenged, building, rallying a much more bigger support than it would have had it been out in the public, where people could have debated easily, dismantling their arguments and just leaving them in scatters. What's your opinion on that, Bethany?
Just repeat that quickly.
So the idea is that sunlight is the best disinfectant when exposing, opinions or views that are just seen as completely abhorrent, bad, no space in society. So by allowing them to be out in the public domain, people can argue with them and just expose them as they are, as just pure nonsense. But by restricting their voices, for example, let's use the example of someone like Richard Spencer of the alt-right, pushing him aside, he's allowed to go unchallenged by the mainstream. He can start recruiting other people who would have maybe listened to more principled opinions and arguments against him, but because no one knows of him, he's allowed to start slowly building up a base of support.
I see what you mean. That's some dangerous shit. I mean, you can't really know what's good without knowing what's bad. But if you have something like that, I mean, for all we know, there could be some really deep shit going down right now, and these motherfuckers about to, exterminate half the population because we don't know of their existence.
Yeah, exactly. So, Bethany, did you have any input in that, or did you want me to come to you in
I think, like you said, like when they come out of nowhere, I think that was like the National Party in New Zealand. The leader was Todd Muller. I mean, he stepped down now, like only after 53 days or something. But yeah, they seem to come out of nowhere. He had a lot of backlash as well. The people he elected on his board, there was no diversity and whatnot. So yeah, I think you have to just be careful when it's somebody new you don't know about just comes out. It's dangerous, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
It can be.
What about you, Philip? Do you have any input on this sort of area?
Well, I feel like we're talking in abstracts, and if we kind of maybe pinpoint a certain subject specifically, we could kind of get into a more focused, like, kind of perception. Like, imagine, for example, like Black Lives Matter, or the coronavirus, or I don't know, conspiracies or something. It feels like a lot of the problem is that people don't want to hear the other side because they are so certain that the opposite opinion is wrong, is factually incorrect. And that's kind of what drives this kind of fear and inability to have this conversation. Obviously, with Black Lives Matter, for example, I think part of the conversation is around the fact that obviously, 99% of people are in support of, not discrimination, and having an inclusive society, right? But then some people inside of that group will be saying, well, Black Lives Matter is funded by George Soros, for example, and they're causing a lot of damage to different cities. So, okay, we agree with being anti-racism, but is this movement actually safe, or are these people actually doing something, I don't know, crazy, or is it, where do we draw the line? Are they doing something that's actually beneficial or something that's detrimental?
Well, it's for sure beneficial. I mean, like, what? I would say we draw the line at them doing what they're doing. We just need a little push in the right direction sometimes. And if that's a fucking protest or revolution, then by all means.
Because the thing with the whole Black Lives Matter is it's the extremists, and it's the way the media portrays it, because most of them who protested, and they did it over here in New Zealand, it was peaceful. And it's you always get the extremists, and then they give it a really bad name. Does that mean we should stop the whole movement? On the other hand, I know there are like some celebrities and whatnot who are black or whatnot, and they refuse to be a part of the whole Black Lives Matter because they say all lives matter. I think like it was, who was it?
Ooh, I can respect that.
Or whatnot, who he said, I don't want to be like some angry, I don't want to be painted out to be some like angry black man and whatnot, and I don't want if that's what the media's intentions are, you don't want to be like lured into that trap. It's a difficult one because you always get extremists, and it's the way you're painted out in the media. But if you are, like Marshall is, a black person, whatnot, you're going to be like, you need that sort of support around, you know what I mean? So
Not necessarily. I mean, you can wing things solo. You don't necessarily need support. I'm just saying.
I'm gonna bring in Grok as well to the chat. Hey man, can you hear us?
Yeah, hey, what's up?
Hey dude. Yeah, so we're basically just talking on the topic of free speech. And what about you yourself? What's your view on it? Do you feel that free speech to some degree should be absolute, or do you think there should be restrictions?
Wait, me?
Yes.
Honestly, like, I'm not really yet into the whole topic of today. It just came to my PC. Need some time to warm up, but absolute free speech, I don't think it can exist, because like your free speech ends when my personal space starts, right? So
Yeah.
you can't just talk about some of my stuff that violates my rights. I just something I wanted to say, because previous speaker was talking about BLM, and one thing that happens, like they're what they say, Black Lives Matter, right? The thing is, a lot of people, for example, in Russia, because Russia is so distant from all of these racial relationships of America, pretty much no one understands what the fuck is going on in America. So a lot of people, while they hear that words, they default to thinking that it is somehow, how to say, like one or the other, that it means something like Black Lives Matter while others don't, or something like that. So as if how to say it, man?
Well, it sounds like a lot of people are just misunderstanding the whole situation
Yeah.
and are trying
Yeah,
to kind of.
Yeah, essentially that's what I'm trying to say. So people lack cultural and historical context that exists within the United States because they are not living in the United States, obviously. Well, in case of
Well,
my
I mean,
country.
I'm pretty sure they have to know about slavery. I mean, there's not a country on this planet that doesn't know about slavery.
Well, people kind of know it, but it's much more complicated than slavery because the repercussions of slavery and racism, they go back through generations. Like your father, like your grandfather didn't get good job because of racism. Your father didn't get good education because of what happened to grandfather and couldn't get a good job either. So you couldn't afford a good school because your father didn't get that. It's like, one after another, like a chain reaction that goes through generations, and people today still suffering what happened hundreds of years ago to their ancestors. But like, you don't even need to go to slavery. You need to go like 50 years back, 60 years back, 70 years back, because things were still happening. The point is, people who are not within US, I just wanted to say something that I see in Russia in regards to BLA, and that people miss this cultural context and historical context. They don't know, and they have this, like when they hear that Black Lives Matter, they like instinctively add the part that they like add the word only at the start of that like only Black Lives Matter, which is obviously not the point of the message. So I think that's why a lot of people, at least outside of US, maybe even inside of US, who don't know the full extent of what essentially was happening, don't fully understand the message of Black Lives Matter, because they have this idea that there's a word only in it, while in fact there is no word only, and that it specifically refers to what's been happening to blacks in America in the last decades.
Okay, so it's, yeah, fair enough.
It's not really on the topic. I just can talk about things very long.
No, it was good input.
Free speech, so flex that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's all welcome, yeah. That's actually a good point. But I mean, like for you as well, aspects as how would you respond to something like what Grok said? Or, like, would you think like a lot of people when they get angry over the topic, for example, of Black Lives Matter, is that mainly because they instantly jump on to the idea that it's an attack against every other race, or that they just don't understand the context initially?
Well, I mean, coming from my perspective, I think a lot of people are just really fucking stupid. They don't think 2 steps ahead. No, I mean, I'm serious. Like, you could tell someone, I don't know, just something completely random, and they'll get something totally fucking different. Yeah, words might have double meaning, but you need to know your facts. You need to have an understanding of what's going down. You can't make a decision without having the proper knowledge. So it's just mostly people being stupid.
Yeah, can I come in just real quick? I didn't really study philosophy in my life, but I heard that there's some concept
neither did I.
in philosophy about what you just said. It's like 2 people can talk about the same thing, right? But their internal understanding of each thing
different.
We have Haugen in chat. Their internal understanding of this thing is different, and before they can truly discuss it, they need to establish that they have shared understanding of the thing, that they think about it in the same way. Otherwise, they wouldn't understand each other. And like in many discussions with people who don't have this background, like in philosophy or like discussing stuff, they miss this part, and they just assume that everyone understands what they say without spending time to establish what they say. And that
100%. You know what they say about assuming. I said 100%, and you know what they say about assuming. It makes an ass out of you and an ass out of me, because you don't understand each other. Things get so twisted, and it can really just fuck up a lot of shit.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say as well, we have Zakesh34. Can you hear us, mate? I'm not sure if you have push to talk, so you might need to hold down the key in order to say something.
His mic is actually lighting up, so something is going on. But
Yeah, I think he needs to hold the button down.
no.
Yeah, I can hear you.
It's open mic.
I don't know.
But while he does that, I wanted to actually move on to the idea of hate speech as well. What is and what is not deemed as offensive speech, and how it pretty much ties in with the idea of free speech as well. So, like, Philip or Insurrection, did you want to go on to that?
Yeah, you can say Philip. It's fine. Yeah, well, I think where you draw the line would be saying inciting violence, right? So if I said, I don't know, if I said that guy is black, let's burn his house down because he's black, yeah, that would be inciting hate speech, right? I hope this channel doesn't get taken down now. But yeah, for example, that would be crossing the line. But if I said, okay, let's have a conversation and let's analyze this, for example, the Black Lives Matter movement. Is there something where it's been co-opted by some kind of organization where they have malicious intent? Like, I don't know if you saw the pictures of piles of bricks appearing in like random places, or that there was a lot of what's the word? Like people that were inciters, people that were inciting violence. So a lot of people wanted to protest peacefully, which is great, right? But then you've got these bunch of people that are like going around and starting throwing bricks and smashing things up, and putting vehicles on fire, and I think even killing each other or something. Okay, so those are actually inciters. They are actually a bad influence. Well, can we have that conversation and say that? Well, no, because if I would say that, in the wrong way and somebody would get their feelings hurt, they'd be like, so you're against Black Lives Matter? It's like, no, I'm not against it. I'm just trying to have a conversation where we can actually openly debate the fact that somebody in this movement is trying to co-opt it. They're trying to push it into a malicious direction, and that's a problem if we want this movement to be successful.
Yeah, Jade, what did you want to say in regards to that?
No, I just wanted that. Philip touched on a good point, actually, and this is one of the issues people have. It's often perceived as this is one of the issues people have at the moment with censorship, right? And it isn't just censorship of words; it's censorship of thought. So, if you don't subscribe to, I don't mean this in like a derogatory way, but if you don't subscribe to the herd mentality or the herd ideology, whatever that is, people don't want to bother debating or hearing you out. Even if it's in their interests, even if it's in your interests, they might enlighten you and help you, show you the ways, show you where you were wrong. Oh wow, actually you're right, you have a point, I'm going to be with you guys now. People don't bother to do that anymore. It's flat out censorship. It's flat out, if you're not with us, you're against us. So even if you're talking about the nuances of something and you're like, well, actually, I don't think I agree with that, people don't want to hear that anymore. It's a problem with freedom of expression as well as freedom of speech. Yeah, that's it basically. I just want to just quickly. I know Philip mentioned what was it, the idea of.
Oh, this is so weird.
Oh, he's in now. Nice.
Oh, hello.
Let's let him speak. Actually,
Matek.
Hi, Matt. Can you hear us?
But I can't hear your voice at the moment.
Like at all?
I'm sorry, I have to say, my friend Matt, he's 50 years old, so he's really bad with technology.
That's okay. No worries.
My man, 50 years old is not that much.
But I basically just wanted to go on also when it comes to hate speech. Who's going to decide what is and what is not deemed as hateful?
I mean, really, the individual themselves. Everyone interprets something in a different way. If someone wants to take it as an attack and feel like it was an assault against them personally, then by all means do it. But what people really need to understand is that nothing is aimed at anybody. Like, words have double meanings. You can take it one way or you can take it the other. It's all about how you choose to take it.
But the problem is, although it may be subjective, is when it's actually used into legislation. to silence certain opinions or certain voices that are deemed as offensive or harmful to the community, even though perhaps those opinions and voices might actually benefit society as a whole, because they might have some truth to what they say. And why that silence, I don't know. But again, my question would revolve around the idea of who are the people that are given the privileged position to decide what is and what is not hateful, what is and what is not offensive.
Sorry to cut in, but yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about just really quickly. No one can be entrusted with that. That's why it needs to be a group kind of like enlightened thing. So it kind of goes without saying, like an unwritten rule that everyone knows that this is kind of crossing the lines kind of thing. And with hate speech, I think, like Aspect said, it's very subjective, it's very personal to an extent. But when it comes to the stage where it's hateful and inciting something, so a lot of hate speech often leads to people hear it and they get enticed, and they do something horrible because of what they heard, because they believe these stereotypes, they believe the hate speech. So that needs to be taken into account, I think. Not per se hate speech itself is a problem. I mean, it's not nice, and people should be shown the errors of their ways, enlightened. It should be discussed why they have these opinions, but it's more the consequences of the hate speech, which we see on both the left wing and the right wing. You have far right extremists that listen to someone speaking their mind, and they go off on a complete tangent and start, performing acts in their name, and the person's like, "Whoa, I didn't want you guys to do that. What are you doing?" So that needs to be taken into account. And I think people, high-profile figures, if they are going to, inverted commas, hate speech, they need to be aware of the repercussions, and be conscious of that.
Sorry, I'll interrupt. I think the term hate speech isn't quite what we are trying to discuss right now. I think hate speech is something different than what you currently mean when you say that. When it comes to hate speech, I think it can be defined regardless of the subject that it actually about. Like, it's not what you say, it's how you say it, and like the reason you say it. Like, you should be able to distinguish hate speech from any normal dialogue by essentially just figure out the qualities of the statement. Like, is it there to instigate people to
which is what I said,
create stereotypes or something
people
like
should be able to do that on their own without an adjudicator saying this is hate speech.
The thing is, in a modern world, we pretty much know that whatever you say, like, you can say literally anything, someone on the planet will be offended by that. It's just a matter of fact.
I'm offended by that comment
because they don't like you personally. Anyway, I think we, as someone said, we cannot trust anyone, like any person, to sit there and say that is hate speech, this is hate speech, this is not hate speech. I think it's more of general, like, education in terms of, I don't know, having a discussion. Because what happens nowadays, what we see, it's related to the topic of social media. I think it was the previous topic, right? The one that I missed.
Yes, yeah.
Modern social media create echo chambers. It creates, how to say, environment where people, no matter what their views are, they can find a comfortable space where everyone will share their opinion.
Yeah.
This guards them and protects them from, well, opposing opinions, and essentially makes them, or rather, prevents them from gaining experience in essentially discussing and arguing about things. And that leads to the violent and emotional arguments over social media about things that could be discussed in a civilized and logical way. So I think the whole argument about hate speech partially exists because of the effect of social media of creating these echo spaces where you can say whatever you want and people will agree with you. But when you leave your space and go into a broader context, you may meet people who disagree with you, and there's a fundamental misunderstanding, because they would say that you are wrong, and you would feel like they are attacking you personally, not arguing about what you said, but arguing about you as an individual, and you get offended, you get mad, and everything goes like to 11 into emotional how to say it,
Turmoil sort of thing,
argument.
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Bethy-Ann, what
So-
do you think on
Kind of
that?
gives people like a false sense of security, doesn't it? And it's like the whole thing of what's the term for de-individualization or whatever it is. In normal life, you would always come across like loads of different social circles, and you just learn like from preschool and whatnot to get on. And it's like the whole thing of when you've got so many other people behind you.
Your mic is cut off. While she says
I
that,
think might be internet issues.
yeah, Zakesh, did you manage to fix your microphone?
Hello.
Hi there,
Hey,
hi
man.
there. Yeah, we can hear you now, mate.
Hi. Yeah, I would. I don't know. Interject something maybe slightly off the topic, but in terms of free speech, you have to realize we're brought up in a society where free speech is a normality, and we're definitely brought up to think that that's the norm. But many societies don't quite have that at the moment. And in that context, you have to understand that different countries have different histories. And by yourself, you can go a lot faster, a lot further than as a group, where you have to always make compromises for people. I don't want to name a country in particular, but you might get what I'm trying to get to. In terms of one country, for instance, is an ancient civilization, has had many golden ages, and has been ruled dynastically for many thousands of years. So that's kind of my point. Just because it's usually the conversations I'd always imagine be slightly biased towards free speech in the West, obviously.
Yeah, that's a good point. Aspect.
And my point is as well, like some countries, they've kind of gone through so much bad history. They want to kind of improve so quickly and do so much so quickly. If they had to think about everybody's kind of, opinions, maybe that would kind of limit them from kind of catching up to, let's say, our standard of living, maybe.
No, I'm gonna have to disagree with that one, because if you don't really recognize or respect or even have an awareness of everyone's opinion, you're not really unified. Unless you're unified, you're not going to really advance that well at all. There's going to be a lot of turmoil and a lot more chaos, because you have those people whose opinions won't really hold or brought to light, and they're going to be pissed. I'll be pissed. I mean, I wouldn't really riot or protest, but still, most people will.
How would you get to a level of where we are, for example, of our level of relative, openness, if you aren't allowed to experience that level of openness? Would that be? Are you talking, Matek, economically or by another metric?
Mostly economically and shit.
Sure.
But you
Yeah,
really just have to be patient.
That's probably the point I'm trying to make, almost, because it's one sec. Because I mean, these conversations, obviously they mean really well, and free speech. I was personally very kind of quiet, maybe in many contexts, because I just didn't want to offend anybody before. But now I feel almost being able to kind of exercise and not build up that kind of tension of holding in your emotions is a really healthy kind of thing to do. Also, you talk about speech, and I wanted to make this point from earlier. You talk about speech being, shouldn't incite hatred or so on, but that's part and parcel of free speech. I mean, in the animal kingdom, chimpanzees, like, there's stronger tribes attack weaker tribes. It's quite normal always. Even if we try to think we're civilized and intelligent, animals always try to pick on the weaker ones. And then there's the whole question of who's more dominating, alpha, naturally, etc. Censorship. I've had stuff censored online on YouTube and stuff. We're as censored as any other non-censored part of the world, really. Just I don't know. Like it's a shame what's happening with Facebook and YouTube because many videos get taken down.
Yeah, amen to that.
It's natural consequences of corporate culture. Honestly, I think the only way around that is either just re-educating the whole society to use or to approach these kind of services and companies differently, or just giving it to a government hands, which could be regulated by laws and to a degree the capitalistic part of it, like making money, could be mitigated.
Interesting.
Yeah. Did you have anything to add to that, Philip?
It's a deep conversation. I don't know. I'm just sitting back and listening at the moment, if I'm honest.
That's no
Taking
worries.
it in.
Yeah, thinking about things.
What about you, Jay? Or Philip, did you want to add on, or?
No, come back to me.
No worries, man. Yeah, what about you, Jay? Regarding this whole the idea of censoring certain people and whatnot, because I know there was a lot of discussion as well that it was exposed that certain platforms like Facebook, like YouTube, have disproportionately been blocking certain conservative voices and whatnot.
Aspects for now.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, aspects.
Wait,
yeah.
I mean, I had something to say, but I kind of lost my train of thought. I'm on my third cup of coffee, but I'm right here with it.
You just had a noise from Mike.
In response to what you said, Pat, for example, in the United Kingdom, there's quite a few high-profile figures who have lost their freedom, lost their platforms essentially. So in that form, they've lost their voice because, as we all know, social media is the loudest voice a person can have right now. One of whom is Katie Hopkins, a journalist, and I think it's fair to say she's hard right wing. She says a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily nice, putting it lightly, and by all for all intents and purposes, she's not a very nice person. I think we can all agree on that, whether or not you agree with her. However, she's been deplatformed from, I believe, YouTube and Twitter because of it's been purported that she's inciting hate speech. The same is true of a lot of right-wing, high-profile figures. And I'm sure the same is true of, you can probably find cases of left-wingers who have had the same thing if they've dared to say something that isn't...
You wouldn't have the left-wingers deplatformed, though, would you?
That's the thing, though.
You think
That's why I can't know, because we're only talking about YouTube, for example. So maybe in regards to the whole social media form of free speech, because social media, as we all know, is very much kind of left-leaning anyway. That's why it's easier to see.
Can I ask one question? I'm not very well versed in the whole right and left. I'm not really into politics, especially the way it is in Europe and US. So, I regularly imagine what right wing is and who would be like a right wing YouTuber like Sargon of Akkad, I think.
Yep. He's more of a centrist, I think.
Yeah, who would be like a kind of radical left-wing one? Like, would it be some kind of, I don't know, social justice warrior guy who, like, I don't know, makes witch hunts on people who are, like, I don't know, wrong about something?
I think Bill Maher is quite lefty. I think any of the American TV show hosts tend to be left-leaning. The Young Turks went from being kind of centrist to left-leaning, in my opinion, in recent years. But there's not as many examples, and that's the point I'm trying to make. Deplatforming people is basically removing their voice.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's something I don't agree
dangerous.
with.
It is.
Yeah,
so
it is, man. Yeah. Do you want to carry on, Aspects? Have you got your train of thought back?
Well, I was just listening, but like you have everything on social media that's basically representing who you are. Like, that's sort of, you can't take that from somebody. Otherwise, shit's going to go down. What people really need to do is not be reliant on something like that. They need to, it's good to use it as a starting platform per se, But for example, when I start my business, it's not going to be off social media. I'm going to be using social media to direct them towards my platform where I have total freedom. I can say what I want, do what I want without having to worry about censorship or something
That's a
getting
really good-
flagged or
That's a
taken
good idea,
down.
actually.
Yeah. So use that. Don't fucking be reliant on it. Use it
Have
as
you
a
heard of
tool.
Parler?
But how can you say that
Oh, what?
today in
Parler, it's like a new Twitter. Sorry, Bethany.
How can you say don't be reliant on it?
By saying it, what do you mean? Don't rely on it. It's a choice. Everything's a
There's
choice.
alternate. So you don't have to use Twitter anymore. I don't know if you guys are aware. There's like a new one called Parler, for example. I don't know if it's popular outside of Britain, but a lot of those deplatformed high-profile figures who have been removed from Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, they're going over there. So I think I agree. Aspect's point is like, don't feel that you have to use that platform. You're going to be restricted. Use another one that gives you more freedom, or make your own one, kind of thing. Which I agree with actually.
But the other one, that's not someone else's. Going to be offended.
You
Someone
have an
else's
issue.
timeline.
Can you say that again?
You cut out,
When you're
Bethian.
on about
Say it
there's a
again.
new, when you say there's other platforms you can use, are those not going to be taken down as well then? If
No,
one
so
of
Not
them
no,
are
not
using it?
if you like own the domain. Like if you own that shit, no one can take that from you.
So
Like, with
for
my website,
example,
I can just throw something up there, and it doesn't matter if it offends every single person on the planet because I own that domain, and nobody can do anything about it.
that's literally why Parler came about. It came about as a response to Twitter's censorship thingy. So the whole Twitter, it's all apparently when it first came about was giving everyone a platform, whereas in reality we know that's not the case. It's giving certain people who agree with us, who go with the herd mentality, a platform. That's why Parler, which is the alternative to Twitter that's come about, that's how that came about, because it wants to give everyone, regardless of your views, that platform that Twitter should have done.
If I could chime in there, if you look at, for example, the example of Katie Hopkins, how she, I really like some of the videos you see of her, because she's really against tattoos, for example. And
Oh wow, what the fuck?
Yeah. You gotta go watch the like the presentation. They're on YouTube. Just type in like Katie Hopkins tattoos. And then she also has this other clip where she's talking about kids, naming your kids things like Precious and I don't know, Australia or whatever, like stupid things people name.
One of her
Wait,
daughters was called India, right?
This chick was like a political leader or something.
No, she's just a columnist. She's a journalist. I
okay.
believe. But it's interesting listening to her speak, because essentially what she says is, I disagree with tattoos. I think they're kind of stupid. You're looking for attention, and in my opinion, I listened to her because I wanted to have my opinions challenged. I listened to her.
Jesus.
What
just happened?
Somebody's shouting. I listened to her because I wanted to have my ideas challenged, and at the end of the day, I think I became enriched from listening to her and having my ideas challenged. But if you, for example, on Twitter, she's like, "You're dumb. You've got a tattoo. Why do you have a neck tattoo?" And that hurts someone's feelings, and then they go to Twitter and they say, "Mr. Twitter, you hurt my feelings. I'm really upset. Why do you have this angry lady telling me?"
How dare you assume Twitter's a mister?
Zer Twitter. You have to remove this person. So is the same thing going to happen with Parler? You can always have these new platforms
that's
popping up.
exactly what I'm thinking.
That's true. You don't know, I guess.
It's like, you hurt my
Like
feelings.
I said, don't be relying on it.
A lot of it has to come down to, like, we keep saying it's all down to the person who is giving their opinion. But there's only so many ways and tactics you can sugarcoat something, because that's just what a lot of these controversial people don't do. Like Katie Hopkins, she's just very direct. Whereas other people just sugarcoat it more. But then is it also like down to the receiver? They've got a right to just stop taking it so personally and not being so sensitive and whatnot, because they're kind of ruining it.
I mean, 100%.
Nobody can have any fun. Nobody can say anything anymore.
Oh, comedy's suffered a lot because of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And that was the one way of people just saying whatever you want to, and everybody knows it's a it's like an unsaid thing. It's just funny. Don't take it personally. And you can't even do that anymore. It's just like really sad.
You should be able to. Like my earlier comment, people are just weak nowadays. They take everything offensive. They get offensive way too quick.
I don't think it's necessarily being weak to be offended. I don't think people changed in that way. I think it's just the culture, as I explained earlier, the social media effect on the culture and the ability of having a dialogue. I think it might change in the future if people like the Generation Z, for example, will grow up with this in mind, and they will maybe be more adapted to and open to hearing different opinions. We'll see, though.
So
Maybe
I mean, you're not wrong, but I really think if people just kind of let go of what they identify with and become more open to hearing new ideas, like social media aside, we don't really need that to move forward in that regard. But it's just people holding on to the ego. And
100%.
Like,
Yeah, definitely.
That's true, man.
I think that was interesting with what Philip said about he actually challenged himself, because I think you Marshall was also saying, it's the ego. Nobody wants to listen because nobody wants to be told they're wrong. Like, yeah, how do you grow from that? How do you progress or anything, isn't it?
yeah, I mean, Sakesh, what do you think about it? I'm not sure if your microphone is working. No worries. Well, I mean, the next thing I wanted to talk about is like free speech in terms of comedians and comedy. Like, would you say that comedians, do they have a license to offend all? Because they're always seen as, to some degree, like the last stand, the last arbiter of. Exactly,
well,
pretty
reason why
much.
people respond so well to like comedians being a bunch of shit faces is because they put humor to it, and if you find something humorous, you're more likely to digest it in a way that won't be offensive.
Aspects. Can I ask you something actually? Because you're as an African American, right? As you associate.
Yeah. Let's go with that.
Cool, man. So like in Britain, for example, there's been like this huge wave of like censorship as a result of the BLM movement. So for instance, I think one that we can all agree with is blackface. I don't think blackface has a place given its roots.
No, that's so fucking stupid.
No, of course not. And yeah, I'm on board with that. But there's a show we have in Britain called Little Britain, and or even like voicing. So like some actors, some comedians we have here are like impressionists, for example. And they'll do like an impression of an Irish person, and then an Australian person, and then a Jamaican person. And what the press have done, what the media have done, is they've kind of axed out all of the episodes that show anything that could be like impersonating someone of, you know, of a black origin, basically. Whereas, in my view, it's like an equal. Everyone's being offended. It's all equal. So if you watch these shows, everyone is being criticized. The Irish people, the English, the Brits, the Americans, the Caribbean, everyone. But it feels like because of like this whole wave and everyone, you know, it doesn't know when to stop and it just keeps going and going and going. Whereas it loses, you know, what the real purpose was in the beginning. What would your view be on that? Like, is there a line that it would need to stop? Or is there like every reference should be like completely stopped, even if it's like an impression to make people laugh kind of thing?
Well, I mean, honestly, coming from my perspective, I don't even think we should have something like that where you're posting someone else, you're kind of highlighting their flaws and what they really deem as unnecessary characteristics that they hold on to as an individual. You're highlighting that, you're putting them on blast, and you're like airing that shit for people in the millions to see.
But is that not free speech? Is that not exercising your free speech?
I mean, it is, but like I said earlier, you shouldn't really have free speech when it comes to, rephrase that. You shouldn't do harm to others. You can have free speech, yeah, but don't harm anybody. That's exactly what you're doing with it. How
do you justify what harms somebody? Because say I put on an African accent, and I hope I don't offend anyone, but I go, hey, what are you doing? Okay. One person might find that hilarious and not have their feelings hurt. Another person be like, oh, I'm from Africa, my dad sounds like that. Actually, I'm really upset that you said that. I think you should be banned. What do you think about that?
well, you can't really ban them. I wouldn't really agree with that being an action. Just like bring it to their attention, like, hey, some shit you say is not really cool, and you can hold a lot of people like that despite your intent, and just make them aware of it.
Okay, but then would that justify that person being banned? Because that's exactly what happened with the whole Little Britain situation. It's a comedy sketch from about 10, 20 years ago, before like the whole kind of social justice movement picked up in this way, and before so many people were sensitive to this kind of thing. And 10, 20 years ago, it was hilarious. It was all over TV. Everybody was watching it in Britain. It was, very, very popular. And now I think it was streamable on Netflix, but the whole back catalogue's been removed because now, in our current time, it's offensive. And okay, so what about the Indian character or the black character? They have a funny voice. Okay, well, that's offensive because they're making fun of people from different places. Okay, what about the gay character? He's doing a gay impersonation. I'm gay, darling. Oh, nice to meet you. Okay, oh well, is that one's not offensive because you have a choice if you want to talk like that? And then okay, should we have that platform remove those people? I'm really curious about your opinion on that.
No, don't have them removed. Just give them a heads up or something. Like before they do their skit or their bit, just throwing a heads up like, hey, something might come up. Don't take offense to it. It's not meant to attack you. It's just what it is.
So a trigger warning.
Yes.
If I can comment on all of that, please. I think what it all comes down is essentially cultural context, and in Russian we have a word "zlobodnevность." I'm not sure how it's translated, but essentially things might have been fine 20 years ago, but they are no longer fine today because the cultural context changed, because we are looking back, we're looking at shit we done, and we are judging things differently. The world is changing, the people are changing. The interesting thing is that while it is not okay today, because it is a sensitive topic, and because we are currently talking about these people that are affected by it, and, like minorities and all that stuff, past 20 years, in other 20 years, it might become acceptable again, because just how gays were like the whole homophobia and all that stuff against gays, it was much more prominent like years ago, say in US, than it is
like
now.
even 5 years ago.
Maybe, I'm not sure about actual timing, but the point is it becomes more socially acceptable, and less people are being nasty about it, right? And without this kind of like, I don't know, negative pressure on that, man, I'm not sure how to say what I'm trying to say.
I understand you, man. Yeah.
The point is we have certain problems, like for example, people are upset about gays, people are racist against blacks and all that stuff, but say in 30 years we fix these problems and people are no longer racist, and then the blackface might come back as acceptable comedic or artistic expression without the like racist or discriminatory context, because that context was solved years ago in social discourse.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of what I wanted to dig
So,
at. Because...
sorry. Just to summarize. So the point is, it's not offensive in itself, intrinsically, or how I said, it is based on context, on current context. So it applies to everything, not just situation with blacks. Like, I wouldn't like a Russian in a shanka with a bottle of vodka. I hate that fucking stereotype. Yet no one is pointing at it and saying it's offensive against Russians, because there's no currently a problem with Russians outside of Russia. We are in deep shit, but no one cares right now. So yeah, as an example. Context, boys.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jay, did you want to add anything to? Oh, sorry, Philip. Yeah, jump in.
Yeah, Philip, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to dig a little bit on this subject, because then where do we draw the line? Is it when somebody's offended by something? Okay, so somebody's offended by the blackface or the gay thing. Okay, so we have to take it down. But what about if I'm offended by everything? You can't say the word flowers, because I was once traumatized by a flower. I'm not to make light of serious matters. I'm really not trying to offend anyone, right? But if I'm offended by flowers, or I don't know, something random like that, maybe I don't know. I'm offended by, I don't know, what's like something that would be weird to be offended by.
People getting offended.
Hold on. I think you might have missed my. Maybe I explained myself wrong, but in this context, like, you can't really draw a line because the line is constantly changing. You have to draw it every time, constantly as you go, and it is on the performer, on the comedian, to judge whether his jokes are appropriate in current cultural context. Because like 20 years ago, we had a guy in Russia who made absolute fucking fun of Americans, calling, like, the main line was, "They're so dumb." 20 years passed and we have corona situation. The point is, like, depending on the cultural context, you can make fun essentially of anything it is, if it is appropriate right now. Like, I would
Who determines what's appropriate though? Isn't that going back to the whole idea of you put someone in a position where they are the ones that determine what is appropriate, what can be said? I don't agree with that. So I don't think there's anyone that can determine what is appropriate. Okay, fair enough. You can say, yeah, carry on.
No one is saying what's appropriate. Not. It's just that we have to develop the discussion within society so that people can understand what is appropriate and what's not. Everyone, depending on the current context, like, understand.
Well, I mean, when it comes to things being appropriate, you have to recognize that you don't even have to recognize it as it being an illusion. Everyone has their own definition of appropriate, so therefore it's always changing. It's never going to be the same, so therefore it would be better if that terminology didn't exist. You just listen to what someone says. You can either agree with it or disagree with it. That's what it should really just come down to.
Yeah, I agree. And I think if you're trying to protect people who can't protect themselves, so like children or people with disabilities or whatever, fine. I think I was agreeing with what Grok was saying. It's constantly changing, and it might be acceptable now, blah blah blah. But I think is it because there's still an issue there, and it's clearly, like we've seen with what happened in America, there's still that underlying issue, just like with feminism and whatnot. It's the same sort of idea where you can't say anything because women get offended. Is it because the issue hasn't been completely solved yet? But then will it ever be solved? So does that mean in the meantime you can't have any humor, you can't have any fun, because there's still like a lot of tension there which still needs to be
Well, I mean, given time, I totally think we'll get past all that shit. Like, giving a reason why something is, well, okay, for example, you're like, oh no, we can't say this because so-and-so will get offended. Get rid of that. Get rid of that in its entirety. How are you going to move on from where you're at if you don't bring that up, despite someone getting offended? Don't stay complacent.
I also wanted to add though, like especially when we go on to words and giving words power and meaning and whatnot, and appeasing crowds and what, are we in fact, like, especially due to the social media, its alarming expanse over the years, are we giving unnecessary amount of power, voice and opinion to very small marginalized groups, so much so to the point that they're actually speaking to some degree representing the country as a whole? Or does that make sense?
Not really. Not to me, anyway.
It depends what kind of country, what you live under. What do we live under? Is it democracy and whatnot? And I suppose why should we just go along with the majority if there's still like a significant proportion of people who feel like they're not represented? Because if we went along with that view of with women and stuff, we wouldn't even be where we are today with people who are like like homosexual or whatever. So you have to have people like that who are different from the majority, and you have to like give them a voice as well and a platform, and you have to give them like human rights and whatnot.
So, BA, would you say in the future maybe we'll have a situation where we don't even have this conversation because we'll be past it? Do you think?
It's like far, far away, but I just think that's what the problem is. I feel like you can have your humor, but then something like the whole George Floyd thing comes about, or there's going to be something else that comes about where it's like a trans person who's being attacked because they're trans, or a woman who's had like a sexual assault.
Yeah, but that doesn't.
And I think it's because it's still not resolved, and until we've got to that point where like people are protected and whatnot, you can't really have humor, because even all these celebrities, things that they've tweeted about when they were children, it all gets dug up and it gets used. And why is that? Because people there's still tension, people are still unhappy, and they feel like they're not being heard.
That's how they destroyed Milo's
not being
career.
represented in a way.
I think what's his name? Ricky Gervais. He's I think everyone knows who he is. He's
I don't.
Oh, he's like a famous British comedian. He's the guy that.
You don't gotta explain it.
Oh, you do know who he is, yeah?
No, I don't, but I don't really care to.
Oh, you should, man. He's awesome. He's a famous comedian, and
Golden Globes.
yeah, he does like he keeps getting invited to the Golden Globes, even though he insults everyone in the room.
That was really
Apparently,
cool.
you like it, but
that's
glutton for punishment. But he himself, when he was asked about this, question, I think, a few days ago on a YouTube interview, and the people asked him, does he believe that there should be any limits on free speech, even in comedy? And he actually surprised me with his response, because I thought he'd be like, nope, there shouldn't be. But what he said actually made me think about it a bit more. And speaking to you guys over the past hour or so, I've started to think about it a bit more. Should it be, no holds barred? And he said, I tend to punch up instead of punch down. So with my comedy, I'll go for someone who I know is in a position, either emotionally or financially most of the time, or culturally. If it's a class system, whatever, he'll go for people that are in a position where they can take it, and they can take a bit of a joke. Look at the Karen meme, for example. It tends to revolve around a kind of middle-class white woman who isn't, pretty decent circumstances. So she can probably take a bit of a joke, and if she can't, grow up a bit, grow up here. But he doesn't go down. He doesn't punch down with his comedy. So people that can't really fend for themselves. So like Aspect and Beth Nyan said, those kind of people that haven't got a voice, that have experienced this kind of stuff on a daily basis, and then they're seeing it in comedy, and it's reinforcing this, it's perpetuating, the stereotypes, these ideas, and it's punching down because they can't defend themselves. So I think that's something that could be taken into account with free speech. Have no limits on it, but at the same time, be a decent person about it. And that goes back to the original point me and Aspect spoke about, I think, at the beginning of this. Don't attack people for the sake of it. If you don't have to, don't. Maybe develop better comedy, kind of thing.
I never knew that about Ricky Gervais, that he targeted those.
No, yeah,
and I think
his wife goes through his comedy with him.
Your own medicine. Yeah.
His wife goes through his comedy routine with him, which is quite funny. And she says, no, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. So it isn't really censoring. He isn't forced to censor his comedy.
There's
but
a threshold.
It's just being aware of.
Yeah, being aware.
Yeah,
and
being aware.
You have to think, who's the audience and who's the ones who are laughing. I think maybe that's why people get so wired up. It's because it's like, are the majority of the people who are watching this and laughing, are we all, most of us are white and we're all middle class, and we're there laughing about that person or an Indian person who are still facing issues today. Fair enough if we're all equal, but we're not.
I mean,
so yeah, when it's turned around,
we are kind of equal.
We can take a joke, so yeah.
Everyone's equal. It's just like a lot of people don't really like to surrender control. Once you let go of control of any given situation, like you can't control that shit. Say that it's about to get hit by a meteor. What are you gonna do? You can't do shit. So once you just let go of that, you realize everyone is equal. No one is superior over anybody. I mean,
definitely. I think it's like some people feel there's the powerful and then there's the powerless, and I feel like if you're in the minority, you're always going to feel powerless. And I suppose if you've got so many who are even using it as comedy, for some that's like incredibly patronizing and stuff, and you're going to feel like weak against like, the masses who are there laughing, and they don't have the same issues you've got or
what if the comedies
experiences.
What if the comedy's attacking everyone though? It's like equal offender comedy, so it isn't just attacking that person.
Offended together.
Literally, yeah.
Make comedy where we're all taking the piss out of how everybody needs coffee. Like, we're so dumb. We wake up.
Yo, man, I need fucking coffee. Coffee's life.
So would I be offending you if I did
show that? And there would be I can't remember what it was called, but like you'd have a white man and a black man, and he would say the N-word to the black man. The black man would be racist to the white man, but it was funny. And my dad told me that, and that used to be not even that long ago. It was like 30, 40 years ago, and people from that time were like so shocked it's not like that anymore.
All right, guys.
So-
Sorry, Philip, to finish your saying.
No, so I think that's interesting. It kind of got to some kind of a conclusion then. So it's about if you're punching up or punching down. If the target of your comedy or your speech is someone who can be offended or like basically not harming someone who's weak. If that makes sense, like you're punching up, right? I think that I resonate with that.
People who have some sort of power and position.
Yeah.
Sorry, BA, what were you going to say?
Sorry, I was just thinking of Frankie Boyle used to be very like controversial, and what made him, I think, got removed was when he came out with comments about Katie Price and her son. And Katie Price is like a controversial figure, and but he started making fun of her son, who he has like learning problems and whatnot, and he can't defend himself. I think it's like when you cross that line, it's like, oh, that's really not funny. That's kind of sad if you have to go to that depth.
But you'd argue that
people laugh because they find it funny as well, so it's not your fault. It's a different.
Sorry, James. I just wanted to add, because what I think was it Matthias or the dude who was in before, when he was mentioning like before he used to be very quiet, but then to some degree that can actually be bad as well, because you have all these vented up emotions of things that you should say or you feel you want to say, but you can't express yourself because you've been put into such a position of submission that anything contrary to the norm is like declared straight away as as a witch hunt basically, and people are pretty much thrown into a state of complete fear, detachment, because they can't actually express what they want to say. And I don't know, I just don't think it can be healthy
into a really unhealthy
because it can
way of life,
because it leads people
like mental health issues and
exactly
stuff.
That's why we need comedy as that kind of outlet. So for everything else, if it's physical aggression, how do you sort that out? You go onto a boxing bag, or you go for a run, or you do this, and you kind of release that tension. The same is true of if you have these thoughts that you can't express. That's why comedy is such a good platform, because it lets people say what they really think.
Problem, though. Honestly, it can be, because if you think you need a certain way to vent instead of just using your mind, because the mind is the most powerful thing that we know of in existence.
But if you're
just letting it go, then
if you're in a social situation and you're asked to express your thoughts in a normal dialogue, and you feel that you can't, it's not that you can say it in your mind. Sure, you can say it to yourself when you're at home, but if you feel that in a social environment or a social setting, online, in person, wherever, you feel that you can't, I think that's very bad for your mental welfare, which is why you need some outlet. I'm not saying that gives everyone an N-word pass. Obviously not. You're allowed to do this now. I think it's just important to vent or express yourself when you want to. If you're asked what your thoughts are, you should be allowed to tell people what your thoughts are instead of shying away from them. So, for example, the whole Brexit vote a few years ago, I felt that I couldn't tell people that I voted for Brexit. I felt that I'd be criticised, ridiculed. People wouldn't hear me out. That's how I felt. Which is not good. Which is it's not conducive to a healthy environment.
But it's funny. It's funny you say that. If I can just interrupt, because it's like who. It's like goes back to who decides what. Because lots of people felt like that with the Brexit. However, when we had the referendum in Scotland, they weren't shy at all in expressing how they felt towards us, and they wanted to leave the UK, and they'd have these big banners and big flyers around, and you know they would make comments to was it our sister in school. Like, so it's funny how it depends. It can suit one person and not suit the other, you know.
But you know why that was, though? Because leaving Scotland, leaving Britain was
It was
the
no, because they have a lot of animosity and whatnot towards the English, which goes back hundreds of years ago, just like the whole racism and the whole sexism. And they were very vocal in wanting to leave the UK. And a lot of people who came from England to actually like help boost the economy, who've also had to experience like racism and discrimination, they felt like they had to not give an opinion, or they were the one. And when it came back, the results came back that the majority decided to stay in the UK. A lot of the English felt like so awkward, because it was like we were to blame because we were allowed to vote because we were in Scotland at the time. And I know of people who've actually left and they've went back to England and whatnot because of that. So it's funny how it's the same sort of thing, but it's a completely different reaction, and it's like that's okay. We're allowed to do that. It just doesn't really make sense.
I just wanted to go on to like the last little segment today before we wrap it up, and that's basically, should free speech have limits? So should there be some sort of limitation to speech or not? That aspects, that you want to jump onto that?
Well, yeah, sure. Like I said earlier, and I still stand by it, you cannot take away someone's right to speak their mind. If you do, then, I mean, it's going to lead into a lot of heavy shit. It's going to lead into conflict, and conflict, breeds hatred, and hatred is the cause of war and shit. And not to mention that, people making bank off of it. So I don't know, you guys can think about that, digest it however you want. But at the core of things, if you can't say what's on your mind and you can't express how you feel about any individual subject, what's that going to do to you? What's that going to do to people?
Grok, did you have any closing statement on that?
No, I don't think so. I think I'm down for today.
That's cool. Philip?
I think I have a lot of thoughts. It's just kind of hard to pick which ones to share. I think definitely free speech is important. I think it's always going to be a conversation. Where do we draw the line? Because kind of as we touched on today, it seems that the line moves. And I, at some point I asked, would there be a future where we would not be offended by anything and we could say anything? There's hundreds of examples where people have had their platforms removed, taken away from them for different reasons. I mean, like, there's obviously the political hate speech, that kind of free speech. That's, okay, somebody might have offended someone, said, "Oh, your tattoos are stupid. I don't like your tattoos," like Katie Hopkins. But if you look, for example, David Icke has recently had his YouTube platform removed. And that's because he's quote unquote spreading conspiracy theories. However, if you look into a lot of what he says, he's got a lot of good points. So what I'm kind of concerned about is, as well as free speech for humanitarian things, I think free speech for important subjects that we need to discuss as a society. Like, for example, right now, Ghislaine Maxwell has been taken to prison. Is she gonna have the same fate as Jeffrey Epstein? Why aren't we having that conversation? Why did all the celebrities jump onto the Black Lives Matter movement, but now when you've got the child molesting pedophiles, nobody's talking about that? So in my opinion, I think free speech is important, but we should also be thinking about what free speech we decide to talk about. I think there's really important subjects: politics, the Federal Reserve, elections, and government. That kind of thing is what I think we should be trying to forward as a society. I think subjects of social justice, we can resolve those. I mean, everything is important, but I think priorities should be also important. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay. Jay?
There was an Islamic preacher in Britain called, I think, was it Anjem Chowdhury?
Yeah,
If any of you guys remember. And basically he preached a lot of kind of anti-West, anti-British stuff, and you know what? Up until the point where he said, kill the infidel, up until the point where he got, removed basically and imprisoned, I would support his right to say what he wants, 100%. You're entitled to think that. I think free speech, you can't have any limits on it. What you can do is you can be conscious of it. You can be conscious of what you're saying. You can, remember that what you're saying is going to affect someone differently than it will affect another person. So be aware of that. So yeah, just free speech, but with with a conscious kind of outlook whilst you're doing it is what, and hopefully one day, as Aspects and Bethany Ann have said, hopefully humanity will elevate to a point where we don't even need to kind of, think about all of the details or if it's going to offend this person or that person, because we'll get to a state where we know we're not going to want to do that anyway, kind of thing. But yeah.
Okay. And BA, did you have any closing words?
Yeah, I would think differently to Jonathan. I think there should be limits on free speech, whereas I feel like you have no limits to your thoughts. And it's just that simple saying that you're taught when you're like in school, think before you speak. And I think that's the thing, like you shouldn't just be able to say what you think. You should be able to think it through and think how the receiver is going to interpret it. So yeah, we've got it's not that we're being restricted. We have our thoughts and whatnot, but just process them before you speak them. And know what the outcome's going to be. I would also just tie in back with the comedy thing. I think comedy can be like a really powerful tool in highlighting issues that we have, but making it but in a funny, humorous, whatever way. So I wouldn't want to get rid of it. Definitely not.
Okay, cool. So I think we'll wrap it up there. But again, thank you everyone for joining in, listening,
Awesome.
and
Yeah,
everyone